Emmanuel, we're at the midpoint of the NFL season. Who do you see as a front runner in each conference right now? Obviously, you look at the AFC, Chiefs, Steelers. You look at the NFC, and it's up for grabs everywhere. Who do you see as the front runners?
Man, I'm so glad that my answer is about to be what it is, because at the beginning of the season, I put out a tweet, Robert. I said, Saints versus Chiefs in the Super Bowl. And thankfully, I see the Saints as a front runner in the NFC. And in the AFC, I do see Chiefs and Steelers. But if it's a coin flip, give me the Chiefs. Give me the Chiefs over the Steelers as it stands now.
Well, you mentioned the Saints. What was your biggest takeaway of that beatdown they put on Tom Brady and the Buccaneers on Sunday Night Football?
They still got a chokehold over the division. They've won the division 3 straight years. They said, nah, Tampa, we don't care what you do to everybody else. You're not doing it to us. The Buccaneers have outscored their opponents by 93 points. They're 6-1 against everybody else except the Saints. The Saints have outscored the Buccaneers by 46 points. So Tampa can go out and wax everybody else. But what New Orleans said was, when y'all see us, it's going to be a different story.
Can Tampa rebound from this? Do you think Brady gets the troops together? He's still got Antonio Brown just joined the team. They're still working on chemistry. Obviously, defense is got a little ways to go after that performance. But can they get this thing corrected?
They can, and they will. The question just becomes for how long, right? With Tampa, you dominate. You lay an egg against the Bears. You dominate. You lay an egg against the Saints. You laid an egg against the Saints in week 1. So the issue is, if you lay an egg every 3 or 4 games, by the time you get into the playoffs, when is that egg going to come? Because for the Buccaneers, it's not enough to just go to the playoffs. Let's be real. You got the greatest quarterback of all time, Hall of Famer Antonio Brown, Hall of Famer Rob Gronkowski, Hall of Famer and Mike Evans. At least that's what Tom Brady says. It's not enough to just get to the playoffs. They got to make it all the way to the dance.
I covered Andy Reid's entire career in Philly, and the knock against him by the end, Emmanuel, was, well, he can't win the big one, and his offense is too predictable. Last year, he won the big one. And it seems to me now he is more and more creative with his offense. Is that a product of Patrick Mahomes and the talent that he has? Because Donovan McNabb was a pretty talented dude too. Or is that just Andy evolving and adapting and adjusting his style?
As a product of playing with house money. When you go to the casino and you start winning a little bit, the money's not yours anymore. So now if you lose, you're not as concerned with it. Andy Reid has won a Super Bowl. The whole world knows he's a top 2 offensive mind, him and Eric Bieniemy in the game. So when he goes out there and runs ridiculous plays like he ran yesterday, Patrick Mahomes catching a snap while in motion, taking a 360 and throwing a touchdown pass, if it doesn't work, not a big deal. House money. So it's really a product of Patrick Mahomes, but now Andy Reid he's coaching very freely. There is no hot seat for Andy Reid for the next 5 or so years.
The joke of the NFL is obviously the NFC East, and I happen to see what the Eagles look like on a daily basis. They're leading the division at 3-4-1. They're the front runner in what is the worst division in football. And there was talk last week. There were actual questions that I thought were ridiculous and asinine of Doug Peterson to bench Carson Wentz. Where do you stand on that? Because I know, Emmanuel, you're more sensible than a lot of the hot takers out there.
You can't bench Carson Wentz. That's ridiculous. The only reason people are having the conversation is because of Jalen Hurts. But I would submit that Carson Wentz is actually doing more with less than just about any quarterback in the National Football League. Carson Wentz has a practice squad receiver last year, Travis Fulgham, since week 4, leads the NFL in receiving yards. Obviously, the Eagles had a bye week this past week, so maybe some other receivers had overtaken him. Carson Wentz has the most players on IR in the NFL. I think they're a top 3 IR team. Without Alshon Jeffrey, without Deshaun Jackson, without Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert was hurt for the longest. Miles Sanders was hurt. Jalen Reagor was out for forever, and it still somehow has this team at first in the division. He's actually doing a pretty good job given the circumstances. A lot of turnovers, I get it, but he also has 17 touchdowns.
Last time we spoke, it was just around the time where your show, Speak for Yourself, was expanded to a couple hours. It was obviously, we talked about you getting that job 4 years to the day where you first auditioned. Emmanuel, what has the past couple months been like for you with everything that you have going on and doing a daily show like that?
A whirlwind. Keep your priorities in order and prioritize your orders. Like it's chaos between Speak for Yourself, Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man, the book, the show, everything going on. It's just a matter of make sure you give your time to what you need to give your time to, Rob. So Been crazy, been really good, been very fulfilling, but I am running on fumes very often.
Well, you touch on that book, and I want to get into that. Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. The show is over 65 million views, which is just incredible. It's phenomenal. The book releases this week. You hit so many important topics throughout that book. I want to ask you first about one that I can relate to, and you probably don't even know this about me. You grew up, you said, with an identity complex because your parents are from Nigeria. You're going to a private school, a white school predominantly. Kids are calling you Manny instead of Emmanuel. My parents are from Palestine. My real name isn't Rob. It's Rabia, R-A-B-E. It's the Arabic word for spring. I had that same thing growing up, and it shaped kind of my childhood, and it played a big role in many mistakes that I made along the way and who I eventually became. How did that experience maybe shape you early? How did you overcome it? And what would you say to young kids who, like us, may have gone through something like that?
I would tell young kids, one, don't doubt yourself and soak it all up. What do I mean by that? Soak it all up. An identity complex is bad because of the word complex, but it also can be beneficial because of the multifaceted growth that can occur. See, I was Nigerian American, but was immersed in white culture and was immersed in Black culture, which is why now, Rob, I'm being able to have these conversations. See, at the time, I didn't know if I was Black because my white peers would say, Emmanuel, you don't even talk like you're Black. You don't even dress like you're Black. You're like an Oreo, Black on the outside, white on the inside. But now looking back, I'm like, wait, I was able to learn from all of those different environments. And that's actually been a benefit to my life.
In the chapter about reverse racism, you shared a story, your second season in the NFL, your first season with the Eagles, and being bullied by a defensive lineman. Can you share with the listeners, because you really explain and help dismiss that idea of reverse racism.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, reverse racism doesn't exist. Racism can exist, but like reverse racism is a man-made concept of nothingness. I tell the story of my second year in Philly. There's a defensive lineman. He just didn't like me for whatever reason. Totally different. I don't really go out. He's a go out kind of guy. I'm a little more reserved. He's a little more loud, whatever the case may be. And finally, after practice one day, I say to him, "You're the worst teammate in the history of teammates." And I said, imagine how silly it would sound if someone said, Emmanuel, you were being a reverse bully. No, I was just simply standing up for myself. Let us not mistake people, Black people, brown people, standing up for themselves against the likes of oppression and systemic injustice and racism. Let us not mistake that for reverse racism. Now, if Black people are going to be prejudiced against white people, call that racism. But reverse racism makes no sense.
What would you like to be the biggest takeaway? I mean, obviously there's so much information in this book, and you go and explain so many different topics and dive into it and tackle it. And you do make it uncomfortable, because I'll tell you what, as I'm reading in the introduction, I grew up watching Dukes of Hazzard. It never occurred to me, Emmanuel. It never occurred to me. And I take a step back and I go, wow, how about that? That is uncomfortable, right? What is the biggest takeaway you hope people will get out of this?
I hope very simply that people realize they actually have the ability, and it is up to them to change the world. At a minimum, change their world. See, Rob, if you can change your household, you can affect that city, because your house, it exists in that city. And that city can have a domino effect on the state, which resides within the nation, and the nation ultimately the world. But we have to each make independent decisions to affect our world, our individual world. When I was a kid, I used to play with dominoes. And I would line about 50 dominoes up. I'd push the first one down and watch them all start to domino down, tumble down. See, but Rob, I never thought, at least imagine, the first domino never thought that it would knock down the 50th. The first domino's objective was to knock down the domino closest to it. And my goal for this book, you don't need to knock down, change the mind of the person in a neighboring state. Change the mind of your neighbor. Change the mind of the person in the neighboring bedroom. Let's do that, and let's see the ripple effect.
I would say sometimes we got to change the views of those right in our own household, right? It's like right there. Sometimes those conversations, man, they got to be had. I want to ask you again, because I know last time we spoke about your conversation with Roger Goodell. Have you had an opportunity maybe to follow up with him? Do you stay in touch? And what are your thoughts on what the NFL has done? We're now midway through the season, what they've been doing, the social justice initiatives, and how far do we have to go?
Yeah, I stay in touch with him and his team. They'll reach out at random and vice versa. And sometimes I'll just send them positive notes, or they'll send me positive notes when they're doing something committed to the efforts of justice. Again, I don't think racial reconciliation is a finish line we'll cross. I think it's a road that we'll travel. And I'm just glad that the NFL is now choosing to travel that road. Some people may condemn the NFL for the pace in which they're traveling on the road, but I am glad that we're choosing to travel that road, because unlike a football game, Rob, we won't be able to look up and say, touchdown, we scored against racism. But what we do have to say is, okay, we're marching down the field. Let's all just march down the field towards reconciliation together.
Last question for you, and for me, this is the most important one, and I know it is for you. You write in your Twitter bio, there's so many things you can say. The number one thing you say, if I followed one, it would be Jesus. Why do you say that, and why is that so important to you?
I like letting people know who I am, what I stand for, and why I live my life. I don't live my life as my own. I live my life for Christ, for Jesus, for God who sent me. And so I like letting people know the only reason I have the ability, the capacity to love others and try to love others well, is because someone loved me first. And that's really what it is it's hoping that this precedes me. I want everyone to know that, like, I didn't start Uncomfortable Conversations because of me. I'm only so gifted. I'm only so skilled. I was called for this moment. I'm being used as a vessel for this moment. It's not about me. I'm just glad to serve.
Well, the book is out. It's available. I hope everyone gets their hands on a copy. I know you have something coming up with Oprah too as well, correct?
Yes, Oprah and I have a conversation. We're having one live Wednesday, November 11th. So you can go to my bio on Instagram, my bio on Twitter, uncomfortablecombos.com/book, BOOK, and you can register for that event as well.
Awesome. Emmanuel, as always, man, thank you, brother.
Yes, sir. Pleasure's mine.